Good morning. Hi. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. I'm Reverend MeeLing, also known as Reverend Susan MeeLing, Lady MeeLing, Lady Dori, Belle. I've been known by a few names. So today is the 13th of June in 2020. And I am on my way to the Montana Vortex. Gonna stop off a couple places on the way, and you know, go and see some stuff. I'm looking forward to it. And whatchamacallit, I'm passing by the Missoula International Airport. Hold on, you'll see an airplane in a second. Literally. See, there's the airplane with the Montana flag. Just in case you didn't know what state I was in, which is funny. Oh, shit. Which is funny because I had found this site about, or this, not site, it wasn't a site, it was a thing about flags. And I thought it was funny that Montana has the actual name of the state on their flag and stuff like that. It was, you know, interesting. And so I'm passing by the smoke jumper training, which is pretty cool because those guys go through quite a bit to be able to be dropped into literally what's called hot zones to stop, you know, those overtly big fires and stuff like that. And so really appreciate guys like that and what they do to make sure that, you know, people are safe and the land is safe and stuff like that. So that sort of training is heavy duty. I mean, it's still, you know, firefighter training is extremely rigorous in a lot of ways, but smoke jumper training, that is a whole other level, pun intended, since they're usually dropped in by airplanes and helicopters. That being said, you know, as I've called 911 a whole bunch of times, mainly about fires, it's kind of ironic to pass by those guys' training facility in that regard. And, you know, tried to call 911, well, not tried to, I did call 911 a whole bunch of times, hoping to prevent too many needs for the smoke jumpers to go in there because, well, obviously that's their job, I get it, but, you know, the smaller the fire, the easier it is to contain, right? Probably, I would guesstimate that'd be easier in that regard and less damage as well as less problems in that regard. So, you know, I really would like to believe that I have a feeling, because Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., couldn't get over certain aspects. I have a feeling, at least I guesstimate, that he couldn't get over certain aspects. Like the fact that he knew I didn't want to be with him whatsoever. And then, you know, throwing a temper tantrum and being childish in that regard. And, you know, if hypothetically he had been one of the individuals who decided that, you know, it would be a better idea to stalk me and harass me than just get over the fact that he knew, he acknowledged he knew that I did not want to be in a relationship with him. He knew that. He knew that. He knew it. I mean, again, like, I was literally put on the stairs in the garage in the house in San Antonio, my house in San Antonio. And, you know, my now dead ex-husband, then just before the final separation, you know, he points out every flaw to Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr. And so how he threw a temper tantrum, because he did, he threw a temper tantrum despite knowing that I didn't want to have anything to do with him. He knew I didn't want to be in a relationship with him. That was a really big sign, realistically, when, you know, if he were to be somewhat of intelligence, not in an artificial way, but, you know, the tiniest bit of intelligence, would be able to be like, so, you know, my now dead ex-husband put me up on, you know, the stairs to point out every flaw, and then be like, so, you know, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, any normal person would look at that and be like, yeah, that's not gonna last. That relationship, you know, obviously wasn't wanted or needed or anything like that, but, you know, went through and that sort of stuff. And so, you know, being in Montana, and then that whole thing in 2017 between, you know, Columbia Falls through to go to Arlee, Montana, to go to the Thousand Buddha Labyrinth with my son. However, because of that female and that male with the 2 to 3 passengers in the back seat of the red Hyundai that just wouldn't get out of the way, you know, Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., had done essentially that with a whole bunch of people to the city of San Antonio during the 151 Road Warrior Fiesta San Antonio Texas thing, instead of getting over the fact that he had gotten the nickname of Cactus Jack in Reserve Officer Training Corps. And that was why he quit, which realistically is the only version of the United States of America's armed forces that you can quit, as long as, you know, you acknowledge the fact that anything that, you know, the college was paid for, you'd have to pay back to the college, which he didn't even want to acknowledge that. He threw it, that was part of his temper tantrum when he found out that he'd have to pay for all of it back. And so that was part of the portion of the reason as to why, or the excuse he gave as a reason to me, as far as why he had, you know, done the 1604 loop instead of not doing it at all, or the 410 loop in San Antonio. And so the stop that occurred, I mean, albeit the male in the passenger seat had not been nearly as broad-shouldered as Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., when I knew him. I will acknowledge that. Doesn't change the fact that his face pretty much looked the same. And then the aspect of, from the rear view mirror, and then the aspect of the male from N as in November 208, and he did this eye blinking thing that now looking back at, meaning Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., had done a similar stupid blinking eye thing. And not like, you know, I know eyes blink, I get that. Just more along the lines of the way it was done, you know, and just one of those, I could see Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., being a part of that, hypothetically, because, again, in regards to at the National Guard graduation ceremony, number one, he was wearing that 151 Road Warrior t-shirt in front of a whole bunch of Texas National Guard graduates, as well as their family members, and who went to go to the graduation for the Texas National Guard when my now dead ex-husband graduated, again, for the Texas National Guard. people who are born and raised, or at least raised and or know quite a bit about Texas history, unlike me, would probably know far more about the Fiesta San Antonio thing, unlike me, obviously. And so, if hypothetically, in that regard, throwing the temper tantrum the way he did with the 151 thing, because he knew I did not want to be with him at all whatsoever, and he knew that I was forced into that relationship. I mean, for example, him, meaning Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., and my now dead ex-husband had discussed what they would tell people, specifically law enforcement, if I had gone to law enforcement to complain about things, just the way my now dead ex-husband did when he was alive. Going and saying, oh, well, you know, you can't pay attention because, like, she had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 and she deals with all these problems, and, you know, look, you know, as far as my now dead ex-husband, look, you know, got to college, and blah, 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 blah. And then as far as Cactus Jack, you know, look, you know, have a normal job. She's just, you know, her. And then, you know, being a stay-at-home mom, neither one of them looked at that seriously. And it's like, so much. And so, and then they called each other brother in arms. Only after that whole, you know, being on the stairs thing. And then not just that, but also the aspects of, you know, at the Texas National Guard graduation, Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., wore that 151 t-shirt. And, you know, after the graduation was over, my now dead ex-husband, then just ex-husband, ran over to yell at me for saluting during the national anthem. And Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., agreed with my now dead ex-husband, said that it was correct to yell at me for saluting during the national anthem. Because how dare I be patriotic? Which neither one of them, meaning my now dead ex-husband nor Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., neither one of them paid attention to the fact that they were at a Texas National Guard graduation ceremony. Neither one of them paid attention to that fact. My now dead ex-husband did not pay attention to the fact that, number one, he was in Army uniform for the United States of America's Armed Forces, yelling at a civilian for saluting the national flag as an E5. He didn't pay attention to that, which, you know, I still don't know how he didn't pay attention to that whatsoever. And then Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., did not pay attention to the fact that it was a Texas National Guard graduation ceremony, not far outside of where San Antonio is. I mean, it's only like an hour away, hour and a half, depending on traffic. And so, I don't know, any Texans that are patriotic at all? I mean, you know, you'd think that as many American flags flying alongside or along with the Texas flag would be a literal big sign that most Texans in the state of Texas have a thing for patriotism. Possibly. I mean, you know, just possibly. maybe not. Now, I will acknowledge that usually you see a lot more American flags closer to military bases and stuff like that, though that was before, you know, in 2013 when I noticed that it was mainly closer to military bases. You still saw them, like, throughout the state of Texas, but the closer to a military base, you know, usually you saw a whole bunch more American flags with the Texas national flag, or Texas state flag. And so, you'd think that, you know, since both of them, meaning my now dead ex-husband as well as Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., would have known, just by those two really big flags constantly flying in that vicinity, about, you know, pride and stuff like that. You'd think, but, you know, no. And then, during the time at Bennigan's, both my now dead ex-husband and Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., continued to berate me about saluting during the national anthem at a Texas National Guard graduation. And I was considered the dumb one out of that. Yeah. Yeah. So, in that reference, for civilians who don't know, just off of the being yelled at, while, you know, that whole civilian aspect, by a E5 in uniform, that's a UCMJ Article 134 at minimum, which is conduct unbecoming of a soldier. At minimum. There's a few others in that regard that would constitute multiple Article 15s, especially being on a military base. You just don't do that. And then to do it off of a military base, to yell at a civilian in uniform, it's against the UCMJ. Just saying, for those who don't know. And so my now dead ex-husband did that in uniform, obviously being a part of a National Guard graduation ceremony, and then off of a military post in front of a whole bunch of soldiers that he had graduated from the same training. So as far as my ex-sisters-in-law and their children that they bred, it's a whole bunch of guys to upset just from that, not forgetting the meat tags. And then, you know, it being the Texas National Guard, again, Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., wearing that 151 t-shirt to a Texas National Guard graduation. You know, maybe there's somebody who was at that vicinity, or since it was in the state of Texas, in the Austin area, maybe there's somebody there that had heard of Fiesta in San Antonio, Texas. Unlike me, who would know what that 151 Road Warrior thing was. And that was before I had gotten to meet some of Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr.'s friends, for the excuses to be given to me as far as why it was considered cool instead of what I thought it was, which it really sounded like terrorism. It did. Every individual I had been introduced to after my now dead ex-husband had died, every excuse I was given seemed like terrorism. Nobody else saw that from the different ones that I spoke with. Now, there were some who were absolutely embarrassed that Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., had brought it up. And then there were those that Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., were proud of that. And so being in the state of Montana, going as I am to the different areas, if hypothetically there was any planning in reference to the assistance from Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., well, it was already terrorism, in my opinion, for the 151 thing. However, to cross state lines to go to Montana to stalk me further with my son, who at that time was a minor, and cause those safety concerns for not just my son and I and my Medal of Honor art project stuff, but also the people of the state of Montana for that road, highway. Just saying, hypothetically speaking, I think that that would take, well, I guess, well, technically just the aspects of the San Antonio Fiesta Texas thing. Pretty much, to me, I can't be the only person that views that as a terrorist thing in that regard. However, to go across state lines, because Montana is not the state of Texas, it's the state of Montana. I don't know how many states are in between Texas to go to Montana, but that, I mean, it's not technically international terrorism unless you take into consideration my Medal of Honor art project, and the majority of individuals who earned a Medal of Honor were involved in international conflicts. And then you could kind of technically look at that as international terrorism because of my Medal of Honor art project having to do with the Medal of Honor, and, you know, the ones from specifically the Civil War, having been the majority of them born abroad outside of the United States of America and being a part of the Civil War, could technically be considered as an international version of that. And then, you know, the religious aspect, because of all sorts of Medal of Honor recipients, particular religious backgrounds, not forgetting all of the different spiritualities in each of the cemeteries, as well as throughout each of the states that I had gone through. Now, while I was respectful, and I taught my son to be respectful in all those different ways, Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr., obviously is not my son. Obviously.
In half a mile, turn right onto White Coyote Road.
And so, hypothetically, if not only the online threats and stalking and harassment in that regard, but also the messing with the numbers of my Medal of Honor art project in regards to how many per state, I mean, that sort of aspect.
Continue on White Coyote Road for half a mile.
That would technically be quite a bit of an issue, I would guesstimate, for not just my opinion, but also, you know, anybody that had found out about my Medal of Honor art project. And, you know, while I had been respectful and am respectful, you know, no matter where I go, despite what I look like. I doubt the same thing could be said in reference to Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kuykendall Jr. So, in regards to the aspects of that that'd be quite a bit to pay attention to. Now, I'm going to the Thousand Buddha Labyrinth. I look forward to it, so hold on real quick. I'll go and show you before I continue on. So, see, that's the Thousand Buddha Labyrinth right there. When in 2016, I had first gone there, I'd followed the GPS to leave. And the GPS told me to go this way, if I'm not mistaken. There had been the fire I had seen in the mountain right across the way. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the house that I had pulled into the driveway to be like, hey, you need to call 911. Although it kind of looks like a different color than it was. No, that's not it. I know there was one. It had a 2-story house. And so, yeah, I had that mountain set over there. I think it was, or maybe it was the other way. I know it was on this road. Nonetheless, I pulled in to have them call 911 because of the mountain being on fire. And so, yeah. Anyway, in that reference of, I think it was that way. So, yeah, in that regard, just interesting finding the smoke jumper trading facility. And, having called 911 as many times as I did, not just in the state of Montana, but throughout my Medal of Honor art project trip. Just to, you know, keep people safe where I could. So, I mean, you know, not realistically that big of a deal. Not saying it's not a big deal, just more along the lines of, you know, I mean, there's like a small little way of doing what I could do in the little fairy-sized way that I could. So, yeah. That's all. You know. Just interesting in that regard, because I didn't notice the smoke jumper training facility beforehand. And so, just interesting to see it today on the 13th of June in 2020. So, anyway, just putting all those little pieces together, if that assists in any sort of way, specifically for law enforcement, but also fire department and EMS guys, because that traffic backup in 2017, when looking back in the rear view mirror, the amount of cars and trucks and semi-trucks and SUVs and vans and so on and so forth that had been backed up for miles and miles and miles. It's quite a bit. And so, yeah, I mean, I tried to get around them, but every single time I did what I could to speed up, that was when they would speed up instead of just getting out of the way and not being a problem. And according to the GPS, it should have only taken an hour and 46 minutes to get to the Tibetan Buddhist monastery from the Montana vortex. However, because of the people that were in the red Hyundai that were in front of me not getting out of the way, would be why I was not. Oh, that's that. I think that might be the house, maybe. I think that was. Maybe. Or wait, no, I know it was in this vicinity. Actually, I think it was this house. Yep, it was this house. This is this house with the satellite dish. Yep, that was it. That was the one that I had not meant to scare. The female that was out on the patio. Just happened to be that way. But yeah, there was this mountain because of the railroad tracks. That's right. Yeah, so, you know, I mean, it just, you know.
Head west on White Coyote Road toward US 93 north, then turn left onto US 93 south.
Just interesting. Yeah, because it was the railroad tracks that were, yeah, so that was it. That was the one. So yeah, just ironic. Anyway, you guys have a good one, because I have no idea how many 911 calls there had to be for that particular situation on that day in 2017. I obviously knew that, you know, they were not getting out of the way, but then again, you know, I didn't involve needlessly, especially in that way, the way that red Hyundai did. So, you know, I see a whole bunch of power lines and, you know, having the cell phone, you know, I mean, there's got to be those ping thingamabobs, right, for techie stuff. Cell phones. And if they had videotaped anything, put it online. But then again, my son also had his cell phone, and he could have taken video footage of that red Hyundai car while I was driving. Hypothetically. So, you guys have a good one. Comment and like and share and subscribe to my official YouTube channel. Have a good one.